We will proceed now in our program with a discussion on Dr. Léna's paper. Questions, please.
This is more a comment than a question. Well, there's a little bit of a question. The world in which the young people now will have to evolve is a very complex world in the technical term. Nonlinear dynamics, unpredictable. And we don't have much heuristics to cope with these problems. So are there educational strategies to foster these abilities, like learn to handle complex systems like a three-body system, three-coupled pendulum, and learn that you cannot easily control them, that they have their own dynamics which nearly look intentional, although it's just physics. Because I think it will become important for the next generation to learn that they are not almighty, that there are things which they will not be able to control, and to support this ensuing frustration that results from this. And it will probably also be a good educational program to teach humility, to make people understand that they are part of a very complex whole which they cannot simply dominate. And is this put into educational programs? Because we are not by nature formed in that way.
Well, thank you for this very important point. I'm not sure I have a broad enough view to answer in general. My impression from many countries I travel in is that the disciplinary vision is still very present in the creation of curricula, and that the type of questions you address are very often in an interdisciplinary nature, which has to be implemented in curricula where scientists may not have sufficient or may not pay sufficient attention. In addition, you make the point of humility, which is another way to stress this relation between subjectivity and values and the actual work of science. And again, science was, maybe that's less true today, presented more in a triumphalist way than with this virtue. So my own vision of that is that we have a long way to go in curricula, both in interdisciplinarity and in more global vision of science. And I don't think that ministries of education, which are generally in charge of this, can do it alone. They really need the cooperation of scientists beyond the maybe traditional and a bit ridiculous way of fighting for more hours of that against more hours of that, which at least in France is the situation.
Yeah, again a question and a comment. One issue is what to teach. Of course, you elaborated very much on that, and I agree. But an important point there from my perspective is not just the contents of science, but the method of science to teach the children. If we're talking about elementary education, evidence-based thinking and so on. And the connected comment or question is that there seems to be there's a very big change that I know you participate very much on the way this is taught, not just the contents. And that is to have, starting with children, but it goes all the way to university level, to have the students participate very actively. So the way the brain works is they learn much more efficiently when they actually investigate themselves, when they are the ones that ask the questions and participate actively, and the role of the teacher is just to set things up. So to me, these are sort of the more revolutionary aspects. So I wonder if you can comment.
Just a brief comment on this issue of teaching what is science. I use process of science, you said method of science. I think we say exactly the same thing. And this is more important than the collection of facts. Now, the second point maybe is less accepted today is that there is a golden age of curiosity, and neuroscience tells us a lot about that now, which is between birth or language or age of 5, whatever, till puberty. And if we don't exploit properly this age, then we miss something which is difficult to be recovered later. So the first idea is use this age at best, and the second idea is during this age, do active science. And this is what I sort of, in a general term, describe by inquiry, which is the basis of all those pilot projects that you have in Mexico with Innovec or the Academy, that we have in China now, in all Latin America, in Europe, etc.
You dealt with education, and I did realize that, of course, education is the whole population. And much of the education, of course, is done in schools. So I see a big problem. Teachers go through university education. After a number of years, they leave and become a teacher, and they do that for about 4 decades. Occasionally, they want to brush up and to be sure what they told to the children was correct. They take textbooks. And as you know, I work in Darwinism, evolution, and I looked up a number of textbooks, both in genetics and in evolution, evolutionary biology. About 90% of these textbooks still today claim that spontaneous mutations occurring to living organisms are due to errors or to accidents to the nucleic acid. That's complete nonsense. We know that nature has the potency to evolve using properties of nature, but nature is able to make the mutation at very low rates, so to preserve the genetic information in a majority of the organisms in the population. You don't see that in a textbook, and I do know from experience it takes about 1 human generation that new insights into how nature functions is finally finding a consensus among all the specialists, in this case biologists, and then it takes another few years until textbooks are changed. So that's about half a century at least until finally the thing comes through. And I don't know how to handle that, how to do something about that. Of course, you can invite teachers to go to kind of courses, put them up on the level, but that also requires a consensus among the scientists, because different people will teach them differently. So I don't know how to handle that kind of question.
Yes, I think you put the finger on exactly the same number I had for the physics textbooks in France, because there was 50 years, two generations. So, I see no other issue again on that than a contribution of a more intensive contribution of active scientists. And to put it more generally, all the reports I quoted, I mean, I give some of the reference in my written text, insist on the key point. If we all agree that inquiry should be implemented on the way you showed, and that it has to be interdisciplinary and so on, science for all, then the question is, where is the best leverage to achieve it? And it seems that everywhere people agree that it's on teacher training, and not initial, but lifelong, as you rightly said. So how can we organize this lifelong teacher training with an appropriate contact with scientists? And I think this is the challenge in many countries to be, and the problem there is that it's expensive, it's time consuming, But we have the advantage, and we have tried it with primary school teachers at great scale in France with internet. We have this advantage of distance training capability, but it has to be organized, it has to be valorized, and this is where the challenge is. Otherwise, we will still be, as you said, in the hands of second-hand or third-hand people speaking of science who carry along mistakes or wrong statements like the one on evolution or on other fields.
I think we have to stop here and come to our last speaker, the last speaker in